So, namaskar to everyone. I teach at Miranda House, Delhi University. I studied at JNU. My post graduation is from School of International Studies in JNU. And my areas of interest are policy, and I have done a lot of extensive ground research in Jammu, Kashmir, and Ladakh. And very obviously, when the Citizenship Amendment Act came out, and when the entire debate on CAA was in our country. So, being a policy area, this I followed this debate very closely, and it logically led on to us teaming up. And I would like to introduce you to the team also. The book Delhi Riots 2020, A Ground Story, has three authors. We don't call ourselves co-authors, we call ourselves authors. All three of us are equal contributors, authors here. Monica Arora is an advocate. She represents the Government of India and JNU as a standing counsel in the Delhi High Court and the Supreme High Court. And some of her key cases, she is a very prolific lawyer and social influencer as well as writer. I have just picked up her key cases. She had taken up the case in which there was a documentary made on Nirbhaya's rapists. I think everybody would remember that. So she intervened there with a plea that Nirbhaya was being shown in a poor light. Then she has also worked on banning of posters on public walls in Delhi, getting Sanskrit its rightful place in Kendra Vidyalayas. I have just mentioned these three key cases. Otherwise, her achievements run into a couple of pages at least. Prerna Malhotra teaches English at Delhi University. She's a public speaker, and she is also very much a social influencer. The book, The Delhi Riots 2020, Delhi Riots 2020, the untold story, basically is based on this incident of rioting which broke out in Northeast Delhi on 23rd February 2020. Those of us here in the audience who are from Delhi would know firsthand the experience of this disturbance. Violence in the area continued primarily till 25th February 2020, and there were also incidents reported on 26th February, after which it was tapering off. We are an organization, a group of women called Group of Intellectuals and Academicians, and we went to the field from 29th February till 10th March. There were 5 members of this research team which went into the field. The other 2 members are also teachers in Delhi University, Shruti Mishra and Dr. Shruti Mishra and Dr. Divyansha Sharma. So based on this, we submitted a report to the Minister of State for Home Affairs, G. Kishan Reddy, and this was done on 11th March 2020. The book is based on this ground report. So basically, as soon as the riots broke out in Delhi, that was the time that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, was in India. And so we saw the media pick it up, not just the national media, but the international media also pick up this issue, and there was a huge narrative created. Now this narrative continues to date, because this is not an issue which is died out. It is not a small riot or a small incident, but an entire narrative that was constructed around last week of February 2020. It has continued with a huge push, and just 2 days ago, the Amnesty International has also come out with a report on these riots. So what are the main elements of the narrative? The core thrust of the narrative is that what happened in Delhi in February 2020 was a Muslim pogrom, and it was not a riot. So correspondingly, the narrative goes like this, that there were Hindutva forces behind the riot. I would also like to point out here that very often it is called Hindu forces, not just Hindutva forces, though I would not go into a discussion about whether these are interchangeable or whether even Hindutva is a right kind of a labeling. At least the narrative that is built around the term Hindutva is a right kind of a narrative, because that would be a digression. But primarily you see that the narrative says that Hindutva forces were behind the riot. A very key element in the narrative is that the hate speech, this should have been within inverted commas, of Kapil Mishra at Jafrabad on 23rd February 2020 started the riot. A corresponding part of the narrative is that the Delhi police was centrally active in anti-Muslim violence in Northeast Delhi. So all these four elements of the narrative fit into a larger narrative of an anti-Muslim state in India. So let's look at, let's try and deconstruct, let's look at the narrative a little more closely. A small portion of my interaction today would be devoted to talking about the narrative about the Delhi riots 2020 as a Muslim pogrom. As per government data, and this is the data taken out from an affidavit filed by the Delhi police in the High Court. I haven't put in the picture of the data because the resolution was not okay, but I have taken these from other, I'm giving you the source. So 53 persons died in the riots in Northeast Delhi. That's what the Delhi police affidavit says. And 77% of the civilians killed, 40 out of 52 were Muslim, while the remaining 23% or 12 were Hindu. This is a declaration that the Delhi police has made in the court. The 53rd victim was a policeman, Head Constable Ratan Lal. And though I don't know why this distinction has been made, but basically the larger picture is that three quarters of those killed were Muslims. Now these figures are used to say that this was a Muslim pogrom. We will be discussing these figures in detail later on. I will also come to a little bit of theory so that we are able to understand the issue better. The second part of the I would request you not to look at the band in red in the bottom. I wasn't able to delete that, but those figures, that interpretation doesn't stand. So whoever is watching, please do not look at those figures. This is the list of properties destroyed. Again, this is a list of properties that was the affidavit that was submitted by the Delhi police to the Delhi High Court. Contains this annexure, and this has been taken from there. At the moment, I just wanted to put a focus on the fatalities and the property damage, because these are two key elements which are used to categorize any incident of communal violence as a pogrom. Now I come to discussions of what really is a pogrom. We have got the empirical evidence in front of us. We have got whatever data that is in the public domain. We just discussed that in the last two slides. Let us have a little bit of a discussion on whether the usage of the term pogrom is valid, or does it have to be, we will obviously, if the word is being used in a narrative, it has to be studied, deconstructed. So I have, in the definition that I have given, also given you the source. It is a document that is written by Paul Brass, a very well-known political scientist. So he says that a riot is a spontaneous intergroup mass action, and he calls a pogrom a deliberately organized, I have highlighted the word, state-supported killings. And the other key words are destruction of property of a targeted group. Okay. So he further goes on to say that there are three phases in a pogrom: preparation or rehearsal, activation and enactment, and explanation and interpretation. So preparation and rehearsal are categorized as continuous activities. And then for activation and enactment, the second phase, certain important elements are there. We look whether we have to look for political mobilization. And one of the instances where political mobilization does occur is electoral competition, and in situations of an election. Then again, what is the nature of this mobilization? That's very important. It's where, please, we will come back to this, but we need to remember these arguments when we start analyzing the riots that happened in February in Northeast Delhi. So what is the nature of this political mobilization? It is such that there is a call for solidarity in the face of a rival communal group. So these are the three phases. And a targeted group, the last slide, I will come back again. So deliberately organized, state-sponsored destruction of the property of a targeted group. These are the key words we need to remember. Okay. So like I said earlier, we will discuss the first keyword, that the riot, that a pogrom is deliberately organized. The targeted group, of course, we know the narrative says that the targeted group is Muslims. There is, they're very clear on that. They do not look into any other casualties or any other losses. But the focus of the narrative, which has been built by the international media and academia, is on Muslims as a targeted group. I next come to the issue of deliberate organization. So who organized? The Hindutva forces. That is what the narrative says. Okay. Now, what is the evidence that this narrative is built on? When you say that such and such group organized a pogrom, there has to be evidence for that. You cannot just say it. It's not a lie or a statement that can be that can become a truth if repeatedly pushed in and spoken of. Okay, so who deliberately organized the Hindutva forces? But there has to be evidence. So what is the evidence? What kind of evidence could be there? There is literally no evidence. Do we have traces or do we have evidence that Hindutva forces, however you define them, was stockpiling weapons? That would be the preliminary preparation organization that any group that wanted to organize a pogrom would do. So there is no evidence on field or in secondary sources of stockpiling of weapons by Hindutva forces. There are two ways that you can deliberately organize. You can organize arms, you can mobilize. There is also no trace of mobilization by Hindutva forces, whatever you define them as, before 23rd February 2020. You will not see evidences of them being out on the streets in large groups, uncontrollable mobs, or engaging in any kind of, transmission of literature, pamphlets, leaflets, speeches, nothing by so-called Hindutva forces before 23rd February 2020. And any mobilization that was evident when we went to the ground was much after 23rd February, 23rd, 24th, even 25th February. Any mobilization that happened was by local Hindus who were defending their lives and property. And that would not count as mobilization in preparation of a pogrom. Now, what is the evidence on the other side that we saw on the ground? Evidence that could help you to deconstruct this narrative of these riots being a Muslim pogrom. When we went to the field, and this is all contained in our book, we saw ample evidence on the field of stockpiling of weapons, creating infrastructure for pyro bombardment. Pyro bombardment is an innovation in these riots, and There was also infrastructure to launch these pyro bombs. They could be acid pouches, they could be, Molotov cocktails, they could be huge stones. We saw all these stockpiled on high-rise buildings in the area. Specifically, if you go on to which are the buildings, we saw the house of AAP Councillor Tahir Hussain, where there was such evidence. We also saw the Rajdhani school in Shiv Vihar, which had evidence of such preparation. And also in our interviews, in our field interviews with locals, we were told that the kind of injuries that were suffered by some of the people who died, they showed evidence of sniper type of preparation, the kind of preparation which is used in Syria. This was indicative, but established evidence is now coming out. We have written all this in our book. Further, let us look at the issue of mobilization, any counter evidence of mobilizations. We spent extensive time in Bhajanpura and also other areas, but when we went to Bhajanpura, we were told that on 24th February, and we met, incidentally, we met people from both communities. Unlike some of the reports and some of the narrative which has, some of the documents which are there in the public sphere, which exclusively focus on one community, we went across to locals, leaders from both communities, and they told us that on 24th February 2020, large crowds of violent men joined rioters from Chand Bagh. Now it is those of us who have been to the area would know that there is on one side of the road there is Bhajanpura, then there is a highway. It's not a small road, it's a national highway. And then when you go past two carriageways of the highway, on the other side there is Chand Bagh. So locals from Bhajanpura told us that the anti-CAA protest site at Chand Bagh erupted on 24th February 2020, and we have seen there are videos in the public domain of crowds crossing over and coming into Bhajanpura, and there is a whole line of shops and houses and establishments, and the very well-known petrol pump that was shown in videos which are circulating in the public domain. Now these were attacked. They had and the crowds were of the they were as large as 10 to 20,000 people. Sudden swelling of crowd happened, and this attack, this can be categorized as a mobilization. So, and the attack on Bhajanpura was thus taken up. Okay. So this is what the next slide says. Evidence is there in videos. So Bhajanpura was overrun. And this is where we met many locals who told us, local Hindus also, who told us that the situation was so bad that they were practically left with defending their lives and properties with whatever they could lay their hands on, maybe a stick that you had in the house, and a few men, they came out on the roads in an attempt to ensure that the rioters don't enter the market area where the shops, very high value shops, are located, and then also their houses. Subsequently, our report went on 11th of March 2020, and subsequently we also have police investigations based on whatever forensics they are using, which are revealing details of this kind of organization. So, so the thing here is that we started with the narrative that it was a pogrom, a Muslim pogrom, but the evidence which is there on ground indicates that it was far from a Muslim pogrom. This is definitely not how a Muslim pogrom is going to be organized by groups of anti-CAA protesters, largely Muslim, coming out on streets and attacking localities. The second part of the narrative rests on the fact that these are state-supported killings. Pogroms are, if you remember the definition that we saw in these slides previously, state-supported killings, pogroms are distinguished by the fact that they are state-supported killings. That is the point that is used to distinguish a riot, a spontaneous riot, from a pogrom. Again, what is the evidence that this was a state-supported killing? There is literally no evidence that supports this claim that these were state-supported killings. We found no evidence of the state arming the rioters. There has so far been no evidence of state agencies initiating riots or state agencies trying to escalate these riots. So this whole, narrative that this was a pogrom, state-supported killings, that is called into question. Now, what is the counter evidence for this claim that there is state-supported killings? One of the earliest, on 24th February 2020, one of the most ghastly ends was met by Constable Ratan Lal in Bhajanpura, the place where that I just spoke to you about, the road and the Chandbagh anti-CAA sites. That was the site where Constable Ratan Lal was practically lynched and shot to death. And again, much later, after we had submitted the report, the videos of this incident were circulating, but our sources were eyewitnesses, what people saw, and what our what our research, what people who were, I don't like to use the word subjects, but people who assisted us in the research, people we spoke to, our respondents told us. Much later, this video is also there in the public domain. Before I come to Ankit Sharma, I have put him here as a representative of state agencies. I would also like to speak about DCP Amit Sharma. And hundreds of policemen, we got the figure of about over 100 policemen who were who reported small and big injuries. We all know the case of Amit Sharma, who was accompanied by Constable Ratan Lal and Anuj Sharma, one of his juniors. These three people had the respondents in location told us that these three had gone to negotiate with rioters, with anti-CAA protesters in Chandbagh, and they were attacked. So rather than a picture of the state engineering these attacks, a reverse picture emerges of the state under attack. So also I have used the term here gendercide because it was a virtual gendercide. Most of the anti-CAA protesters had a ring of women who were at the front, and supposedly anti-CAA protest sites have been glorified as space where women were empowered. However, it's very sad to say that there is evidence of a gendercide here. So am I audible? Police and community leaders, we also spoke to, since the role of the police was being, and the state agencies was being scrutinized, we spoke to them. We spoke to community leaders, we spoke to the police. And if you look at our book, if you pick it up and see it, there is detailed evidence based on interviews with community leaders, Muslim community leaders, Hindu community leaders who have told us that the police worked with them, tried to establish peace in a situation that was rapidly going out of hand even before 23rd February 2020. The situation in Northeast Delhi was there are many times that it came to the brink of a riot. If you pick our book, there is extensive tabulation of this, and there is also evidence as annexures of the number of times that this locality came to the brink of a riot, starting from 15 December 2019 to February 2020. So rather than the picture of the state agencies emerging as the villains of the peace, we have concrete evidence of the state the police trying to negotiate, trying to work, trying to look at these protests as within the framework of a democracy, which gives you the right to protest. So the role of the community leaders, I would really like to highlight. When we went down to the field, many of these community leaders, they told us that outsiders who were leading the anti-CAA protests, they had influenced the area residents against the leaders. And this, I would just like to go into this, is a slight digression here. But this is an important point in understanding how communities in our country, how communities in Northeast Delhi came to the brink of this confrontation. So in any place, in any locality, the role of senior community leaders is very key, very significant in keeping the community integrated, cohesive. We spoke to residents there. It's not as if there are no issues between communities, but they're happily and amicably resolved because there are these few individuals who act as leaders of their communities. So therefore there is a huge influence. Especially amongst the Muslims, the network runs from senior Maulanas who, are there in key institutions, madrasas in the area. And then you have the network running from the seniors to younger colleagues to, youth in the locality. And this is the chain which largely keeps a community integrated, cohesive, and grounded in that area. Now, this is the network that is a prime target of what we in our book have identified as the urban Naxal Jihadi network, which was operating in Northeast Delhi and in other areas of Delhi and in other areas of the country. So now, if such networks are targeted, the urban Naxal Jihadi combine works very systematically. Our book has demonstrated that. Now, the one way to ensure that an area becomes chaotic, community relations in an area become chaotic, is when you break down these networks. And these are the networks which are being targeted, by these groups, the urban Naxal and Jihadi groups. So once this relationship broke down, and in Northeast Delhi, it broke down somewhere in according to the respondents in the field, it broke down somewhere around December 2019. And after that, there was no looking back. The area was rapidly spinning into chaos. So these leaders have a legitimacy, they have a position. Our book describes this in detail. I have just spoken about the major points which are there on this slide. I would not like to go back to that. But there is also evidence of the fact that these community relations are sacrosanct, and if they break down a situation, the situation escalates beyond control, and especially in areas like Northeast Delhi, which is the population density of that area is the highest and also has very high mixed populations. Localities where very high mixed populations exist. So, okay, so that was as far as pogrom that is being deliberately organized, in this case against a particular community being the Muslims, and also it being state sponsored. We have seen how there is in fact, there is no evidence of the fact that there was a mobilization by the Hindu community targeting the Muslims, or there was a mobilization, or there was any extensive preparation, arming, and indulgence by the state agencies. So that brings to question this entire narrative of whether this can be called a pogrom directed at the Muslims. There are other elements of the argument that we need to look at. We had in our previous slides discussed fatalities amongst the Muslims. We had also discussed how property was destroyed. I will just take up these two points. Now, the demography of Northeast Delhi is a very interesting, brings about very interesting insights, if you look at the 2011 census reports, I'm not quoting the figures exactly because it's not required, but supposedly a 60-40 ratio between Hindus and Muslims. If you look at Northeast Delhi as a whole, but then Northeast Delhi also has certain areas in which the population of Muslims exceeds 70%. So there is a 70-30 ratio. I'm talking about it very broadly. I haven't gone into, I have not got those figures, but those figures are available in the public domain, and we have also quoted them extensively in our book. So now, what are these? Now, some of these areas, there are also areas in which, some of the areas which were affected by the riots, the situation is also reverse. You have areas where there is a 90-10% ratio also broadly, approximately, between Hindus and Muslims. But the key point that I'm trying to make is that this is a demographically very nuanced and a very, very different kind of an area. So what we see is, what we discovered when we went to the field was that the violence basically happened in a tri-junction of Shiv Vihar, Brijpuri, Mustafabad. So it's a tri-junction, Tiraha. It is called a Tiraha. So this Tiraha is, the demography of this Tiraha is what will lead us to, certain nuanced conclusions about about the figures of the deaths, about Muslims being 77% and about Hindus being, lesser than that. Though primarily this argument itself is, is an argument which does not work very well in situations of riots. I will also explain why I am saying that. But since the Delhi police has given this affidavit, this declaration is there, this is the only official data that we have on hand. So therefore, it merits discussion because it is a very significant part of the narrative that is going around with reference to the Delhi riots. Now, the first point that I would like to make is that places where there are maximum fatalities and violence, I would add, and violence, these are very close to Muslim majority areas. It is not as if there are no Muslims in that area, or Muslims are a poor minority or a insignificant minority in these areas. I'll just give you one small example. For instance, if we are talking about Shiv Vihar, which is a part of Karaval Nagar, which is, a Hindu majority area, just across the road from Shiv Vihar, we have Mustafabad, which is a Muslim majority area. So these kind of insights are there. If you look at the geography and the demography of that area. So it's a very, this whole question of why there are more Muslim fatalities is not simplistically answered. It is not, you cannot answer it in one line that there are more Muslim fatalities because the Hindus attacked the Muslims. It's unbelievable. It does not stand ground. Okay. The other thing is that Muslim casualties have also happened in Muslim dominated areas like Jafrabad, which is close to more than 70 to 80% Muslim dominated. Then Muslim fatalities have also happened in Karawal Nagar Assembly constituency, which is a Hindu dominated area. But this is also the place where you have a high number of Hindu casualties. So how do you, more research, more nuance is needed to, really study this data which is there in the public domain. Shiv Vihar, which is an area where there are reports of, and we saw evidence of, casualties amongst both communities, also Muslims. So it is a part of Karawal Nagar, but it is contiguous with East Karawal Nagar, which is a part of the Mustafabad, constituency, which is a Muslim majority area. So it is like this. These are just, these are roads across the roads. Or there is a road running across where on one side you have a Muslim majority area and on one side you have a Hindu majority area. So this whole picture of, Northeast Delhi being a Hindu dominated area where Hindus or Hindutva forces, turned onto Muslims is, will require a lot of nuance to understand this. Okay. If you look at property, destruction of property, government data, the data that which I had displayed earlier, it does not triangulate with what we saw on, we accept the data, of course, I'm not questioning that data, but as a researcher, it should triangulate with what we saw. And in our book, we have shown how very high value, very high value properties were destroyed, which were owned by Hindus. I will just give you one example of the Arun Modern Senior Secondary School, which we saw in Bridgepuri, in which we saw it's a school, it's an educational establishment in which the residents as well as the owner of the school told us that, ma'am, we have 80% of our students belong to the Muslim community. So, but totally destroyed. We saw piles and piles of burnt books. The amount of violence that must have gone in to pull down this school. We have evidence in the book. We have, given pictures. We have given insights from our interviews. So maybe at some point of time, we will have to look at what is also maybe the number of properties destroyed by, is more, belongs more to the Muslims, but that also has to be, there has to be a deeper study, a more, a thicker study of property also. Also, some of the affected families from both communities are so poor that, we saw that they could not even afford the last rites of their dead. So this entire, there are a number of things which I would like to say here also. In a riot-like situation, there are a number of missing persons also. Data on that is not available. There is, immediately after the riots, there was the lockdown. So a lot of, things which could, lot of data which could have come up was, practically locked down. Also, when you are talking about property, there was a relief camp set up at Eidgah, and, the state as well as the Delhi government as well as the community was very active in, filing for claims and for compensation. So there is a good chance that there are a number of people who have not yet filed compensation, or this is data which is fluid. So just to base the argument that this was a Muslim pogrom on these two, both fatalities as well as loss of property, is, in my opinion, a premature conclusion and would require more, in-depth study. So, when we are talking of casualties, in any riot, whether it's the Delhi riot or it's the Gujarat riot or it's, any riot that we've had in our country, it is important to look at the sequence of events. I would just request the organizers to prompt me if I'm, going beyond time, because I mean, that's just a request. So when you look at the sequence of events in locale casualties, that is important. So in our study, we found that this was the sequence of events in Northeast Delhi, and this is there on the screen. We had one victim, Dinesh Kumar Khatik, shot on 24th February in the forenoon, and this was the person who was shot here on his forehead from a distance of about 300 meters at least from the rooftop of Rajdhani School, which many people told us leads to the conclusion that this is the work of trained snipers, trained shooters. Vinod Kumar Kashyap was another victim who lost his life on 24th February night out shopping medicines for his grandson who was ill. By 9:30 at night in the same area, Dilbar Negi was killed in a very gruesome manner. Then you had Prem Singh, a rickshaw puller, on the morning of 25th February. Again, he was out shopping for milk at 8 a.m. These are cases which we have documented. Rahul Solanki, when he goes out on the same day on 24th February to, buy milk, buy groceries. Rahul Singh on 24th February, a few meters away from his house. And again, Ankit Sharma, I'm sorry, the chronology is a little, So Ankit Sharma on 25th February in Shiv Vihar in the evening. Muslim casualties largely start appearing. This is a study in progress. They largely start appearing around the night of February 25th or 26th, indicating the possibilities of a retaliatory violence. And we, once we had submitted a report and subsequently police investigations are coming out, FIRs are slowly coming out into the public domain, and all this is being corroborated by police investigations. So more or less, I don't really know if this is the way that a Muslim pogrom would look. If this is what a Muslim pogrom would look like, it is more likely a riot in which retaliatory violence then happened. Okay, so I've already spoken about incomplete data as far as properties are considered. Value of properties also have already spoken. Sequence of events is also important when you look at the destruction of property, because that would actually the sequence of events of casualties, which is very difficult to establish in a riot situation, very difficult to establish. So and also the sequence of destruction of properties, which may be a little easier to establish, because unfortunately you're killing a human being, disposing him off in a drain. You find his body on a particular day, then forensics are involved in estimating the time of his death, and also very, very difficult to describe, very difficult to establish a sequence of events as far as casualties are considered. But, both these things are important to reach a conclusion which has been so glibly, so, easily reached by this narrative that is there with reference to the Delhi riots, that it was a Muslim pogrom, raises questions on that narrative. So if it was not a Muslim pogrom, which is a conclusion that we can safely move towards, what was it really? See, many of the reports that are there in the public domain with reference to the Delhi riots 2020, very surprisingly, start the study of the Delhi riots from 23rd February 2020, which was the day that the violence was initiated. This is a declaration made publicly by reports which have been given by statutory bodies like the Delhi Minorities Commission. And it is very surprising and very astonishing that they have declared that they are not looking at events before 23rd February 2020, whereas our study looks at these events before 23rd February 2020, which are significant in understanding the sequence of events as they occurred in Northeast Delhi. So broadly, we could look at, because four phases, because the decision to go into Northeast Delhi and study those riots was not a knee-jerk decision. We are residents of Delhi. We had been observing what was happening in Delhi ever since the CA was notified and passed in the parliament and notified. So we were living the experience of Delhi sinking into chaos, and therefore for us it was a logical conclusion to go into Northeast Delhi when the riots happened. And it was also very clear, the linkages with what was happening before was also very clear. So we look at it broadly as four phases, starting from roughly around 15 December, a day or two here and there, where on 15 December there was violence in Jamia and AMU. It can in no way be characterized as student protest. It was outright street violence. We have described it in detail in our book. And this predictably led to police action. In no country in the world can you destroy public property and lead a locality into such a potentially dangerous street fight without inviting police action. So there was police action, which quickly led to the establishment of, the entrenchment of Shaheen Bagh and other CA protest sites all over Delhi, many in Northeast Delhi. We have all the details in our books tabulated and date-wise in our book. So these phases are not compartmentalized, they flow into each other. So after that, there is this plea that is often, heard in our country, that these anti-CA protest sites were democratic, peaceful, etc., with evidence. We have spoken about this in our book, that these were far from peaceful. So, however, in the next phase, these protest sites settled into a pattern. They also settled into a pattern because very rapidly elections in Delhi were announced, and there was a larger political framework which was imposed on the whole issue. So, after the establishment of Shaheen Bagh, then we observed the development of a model which we have in our book called the Shaheen Bagh model. And that model entailed, certain activities which were coordinated throughout the anti-CA protest sites in Delhi. So blocking of metro stations developed as a part of this model. So we had elections. We have documented the number of speeches which can actually be categorized as hate speeches. We had leaders like Amaratullah Khan, playing to the galleries. And I would like to point out the issue that I raised in one of my early slides, that there is political mobilization which is backed by electoral, which is largely electoral in nature, and there is appeal to specific communities. So that is how a pogrom is planned. But we see that it is being, rather than it being a, pogrom aimed at Muslims. It was coming from leaders of the Muslim community. So the book contains these details. So nature of mobilization was largely along communal lines, especially in combination with the anti-CAA stance, which was taken by many political parties. Elections got over, results were announced on 11th. But from about 10th of February, there was an escalation. We see there are calls for marches. We have, in the public domain, videos of leaders from the Congress party, some of the student leaders who are now under arrest for this case. Bahar Aao March hai, Bahar Aao March hai. So this march thing became, come out for a march, come out in the streets. This was the, kind of idea. This was the kind of call that was being given. So as another week passes, we, zoom down to events on around 23rd February. This is also the time when the president of USA was scheduled to come to India. And then you have events happening specifically in Jafrabad. In the early morning on 23rd February, we have given blow by blow detail in our book where the Jafrabad metro station was jammed. And this was not the first time. We have given in our book details of how many times metro stations were jammed in that entire area. So now I was trying to, in our book, we have this map. Now, Jafrabad is one road which, it stretches out like this. And then it's called the 66-footer road, which is the road which is the bone of contention. And then along this road, you have Jafrabad, you have areas like Kardampuri, you have areas like Kabir Nagar. A little further, you have Seelampur. Also on the 66-footer road, you have a number of schools, educational establishments. Class 12th exams, CBSE board exams were scheduled on 24th February. So on 23rd February, you have protesters from moving into the Jafrabad metro station, women protesters largely. And then eventually, a few hours into the morning, both carriageways on the Jafrabad road on this 66-footer road are blocked. Once you block the 66-footer road, you are blocking a population of around 25 lakhs from access from outside, because you already have Chandbagh, which is blocking Bhajanpura. And so you are closing in a population of 25 lakhs. Plus, this is also a day in which CBSE board exams are there and local residents are at the edge. Their children cannot go to school to give their exams. Total situation of total chaos because the metro station and the carriageways are blocked. The police also blocks those roads to prevent any untoward incident from happening. So this was the situation on 23rd February. Was already Jafrabad, this 66-footer road, there were already skirmishes happening between Hindu populations living in, Kardampuri, and the locals out there were actually really quite agitated. We met people from both communities told us this, that the situation there was really tense. So a little bit more on the model. The model works like this. You establish an anti-CAA protest site, then you block metro stations, then you block key arterial roads, and then you, within the anti-CAA protest sites, there is huge amount of polarization on the basis of an anti-CAA stand happening. So, it is all there in the public domain. I will just mention here that one single poem that is out and that became so popular in the in Shaheen Bagh and in the anti-CA protest site, sab yaad rakha jayega. If you look at that poem, that is a media creation that could flummox, that could agitate any normal person. The kind of lighting used, the kind of lyrics used, the kind of facial expressions used, and it and this high decibel polarization was happening all along since December 2019 in all these anti-CAA protest sites, and ultimately leading up to events of 23rd February. So also there were Azadi marches. I've already mentioned blocking of metro stations, blocking of arterial roads. Here I would like to mention that on 23rd February 2020 itself, if there was a situation developing in Jafrabad, exactly the same situation was developing in South Delhi in the Malviya Nagar area, slightly more specifically called the Hauz Rani area, where a second site of riot would have developed if it was not stopped by timely state action. So you would have Delhi rioting in two areas. But the case, I'm mentioning the case here just to show you that yes, there was a model that was developed. So if the question arises then who really engineered these riots? So there is clear evidence of the involvement of urban Naxal, communist, jihadi elements. Now, this is a conclusion that we reached because of what we saw on ground. Every protest site, every demonstration, every organization has a media. By media, I mean posters, slogans, flyers, pamphlets, whatever have you. That's protest media. Now, the protest media that we saw in Northeast Delhi clearly indicates the involvement of outsiders and the involvement of urban Naxal, communists, and jihadi elements. The details are there in the book. Please look at the book. We have given you details of posters, we have given you details of slogans. We have also given you insights from field interviews with both communities, which indicates that these were outsiders and they planted a model they have, planted and tested a model in Northeast Delhi. Now, this model also corroborates with the models which are exemplified in two key Maoist documents. What are these documents? The Strategy and Tactics of the Indian Revolution, from where largely the term urban Naxal is derived. The allegation is that you pull up and call everybody urban Naxal, anybody who's anti-state urban Naxal. No, there is a definition of urban Naxal given to you by these Maoist documents. We haven't pulled it out of thin air. It is very much there. Please, the book contains a detailed analysis of these two documents, the urban perspective and the strategy and tactics of the Indian Revolution. We have also looked at jihadi doctrines, which are, which were largely looked at books by Al-Madudi and many organizations that support these ideas. This is any research, any study, any book, especially ours is a study in progress. We can, go into great depths and hopefully come out with a second edition and many more editions. So also in the book are stories of victims of both communities. We spent a lot of time, like I said, from 29th March to 29th February 2020 to 10th March, constantly talking to people from both communities. One section of the book is narratives of the pain that both communities underwent. We met leaders from both communities. We met locals from both communities who told us first-hand accounts of how this violence has affected them. We went to we interviewed law enforcement officers and their families to understand as many people as we could speak with, as many variables as we could study, as much depth as we could achieve in a period which rapidly launched into a lockdown. So that is also there in the book. So the book itself has landed up attracting attention because of the controversy over its deplatforming by Bloomsbury. I would not like to go into very much detail there, except that it's very unfortunate the relationship between a publisher and an author is a very pious relationship. And unfortunately, this relationship with Bloomsbury broke down under pressure from a Twitter lynch mob, a social media lynch mob, which was led by the likes of William Dalrymple, Atish Taseer, Swara Bhaskar, Nidhi Razdan, and they're not even, it's not as if they lynch and hide. They're very much celebrating the deplatforming of this book, which was the #1 bestseller on Amazon in the category of political freedom on pre-order before it was pulled out, and the pulling out was outright an attempt to kill the book, to not let the book come out into the public domain. But now we have Garuda Publications, Garuda Prakashan took up the publication of this book, and the links are displayed on the screen, and the book is available for pre-order. I would request everyone to, consider buying the book. It is also now going to be available in Hindi and English, and we also in talks with the publisher for translations into other languages. With this, I would like to thank everybody for listening to me so patiently, and I would like to thank the organizers of this talk for giving me this platform and for facilitating a discussion on this book, which I believe has now become, the authors have dedicated this book to Bharat. It is something that the country will, it's the country's book. It's being written by the country at this point of time. The book is being authored by the people of Bharatvarsh. Thank you. Namaskar.
Sonali, I'll start off with a comment and a question. The question first. So it's pretty evident that this was after the planning and the early incidents of violence by the Muslim community, when there is a backlash from the Hindu community, why does the state, and I recognize you may not have an answer for this because this is in the range of IPC Act and so on and so forth, Police Act, but why does the state look at both acts of violence equally, right? There is one violence which is in defense, and there is one violence which is planned to attack a community. That's my question, and I will make a comment also, and you may want to respond to that, is that there are PDFs actually circulating around of your book. I think Anand Ranganathan, if I'm not wrong, pointed out that it has the cover of Bloomsbury. Do you think Bloomsbury has actually leaked the PDF to harm you and Garuda? That's the second part of my question.
Okay, as the first question is, you've already answered that. Law is, since law has this, when we say law is blind, we don't mean that it doesn't see anything, but it sees everything from the perspective of established legal precedents, and in our country, the Indian Penal Code. So that situation would be something that, when the state looks at both Hindus and Muslims as either as perpetrators or as victims. So that would be that cannot be avoided, or that can only be questioned by. We are a democracy. We have the right to question that, but definitely that is the way that law will proceed, and that is how you see it proceeding, even in the case of the Delhi riots. As regards the PDF which is out, number of people have told us, as authors, we are not even looking at that. At this point of time, we are working with Garud, which is doing a brilliant job of bringing out the other version. I would just like to, through your platform, Rahulji, appeal to anybody who is getting the PDF, dump it, buy 2 copies, because this is what Bharat is. This is how Bharat will respond. Our book was deplatformed by white-skinned colonialists who, even in 2021, the pressure came from UK Bloomsbury under the leadership of, I will say, colonialists and their Asian compradors. I will use these words. Therefore, the people of Bharat Varsha will respond, and they are responding. They are responding by buying 5 books. 1 PDF, 5 books. That is the way that this country is fighting back.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, 15,000 pre-orders at Garuda.
More than that now.
More than that now. Okay.
Yeah. My question is whether it is an anti-CA protest or anything, it is a Northeast Delhi riots. The complete groundwork was done by radical Islamists, and then the fake narrative was built up by the left liberals in mainstream media. I am asking to the ma'am is that how you explain the harmony between the radical Islamists and these left liberals?
Prem Sagar Reddy ji, that's a good question. I would just like to make a minor correction. I would not like to validate or glorify or put the liberals along with the left. Okay, so this term left, let's just call them what they are on their face: radical leftists, communists.
Sure.
Okay, so I mean, it's just an appeal. I think all of us should use this term. We should not concede liberal space to them, not at all. So, having said that, if you look at patterns all across the world, this is happening all across the world. This coming together of the left radicals and the Islamists, they are coming together all over the world, where, if the liberals do have any role to play, they are probably just sitting on the fence and unable to, decide what to do, or their voices are just, at least people who are coming out as liberals are not true liberals. That is what I would like to concede here. But this network is happening throughout the world, and there is ample evidence. You are young, you may be a student. Please make a case study and see how this is happening. Just 2 days ago, just yesterday, it has happened in Sweden. All across the world, before the anti-CA protests, I'm talking about this entire red marches which happened in countries ranging from Cuba to Pakistan to India to, a number of countries, to Lebanon, to, whole range of countries where this kind of outrage is playing up. And also in the USA, where this coming together is pretty much evident under the banner of Black Lives Matter and other such events. So you're right there. This coming together is there. It's not so much of a question that you asked. I'm just validating what you are saying.
First of all, I'd like to thank you actually from the bottom of my heart in bringing about this wonderful book actually, right? So to just to let you know that I already ordered five books. I live in Sydney, by the way, so I ordered 5 books so that I can distribute. I'm planning to order more so that I can distribute to the local government's officials so that they'll get the real background, what's happening there. So it's more of an kind of a comment rather than any question here, is that as you describe, what you describe in your PowerPoint is that it's not just an ordinary riot that people got offended by some random remark, and then they got up the street and did it. It's almost like it is a very well planned, almost like a mini war. So in that case, how did our Indian intelligence so badly not figure this out? I mean, like, how did they miss this? And that too, when it was planned to be done, when American president was there, when the whole media was there in Delhi, and it was supposed to be expected, right? This is after 2 months after the introduction of CAA. It was planned right on the time when Trump arrives. So how did we miss that? Yeah, I mean, not trying to ask you a question, but I just thinking aloud at this point.
That is a question, sir, that came up many times in our minds also, and in conversation with people, with respondents also. But I do agree that this is something which needs to be looked into. Even now, one of the primary reasons why we actually made so much efforts to bring out this book was that we believe, sir, that this is not the pushback against urban Naxals and jihadis will not primarily come from the state. It will come when people in a democracy have to raise issues. When people know what is happening, when people raise this as an important issue, when we are ready, when we know that, what are the kind of organizations that our children are going to get influenced by, when we are in, as citizens of a democracy, this is the only answer that I can give, that we responded to this situation by trying to bring out what is the truth out into the public domain. And eventually it may lead to changes in the security establishment, the government, the intelligence agencies. They would all have to think about their roles and their the ways of functioning. It's definitely a very core internal security issue, and we have pointed it out in our book.
Sonali ji, I think it is wonderful to listen to you and really appreciate the way you people have gone on to the disturbed areas and done so much of work. It requires a lot of guts and really requires to be appreciated.
Sir, we have blessings from elders like you.
We thank you for doing all this work.
So this is a blessing from elders like you, sir. Thank you so much.
Sonali ji, let me just say this. Now, you have put across how the models have been worked out. They appear to have been worked out over a period of time in a very nice, smooth way, all over the world, from here to Lebanon to USA, wherever it is. Now, the possibilities of this getting duplicated and replicated in our country exists. Is it so? Would it be possible? And what can we do to stop that?
We saw this happening very rapidly in Bangalore, and we have just seen it happening in Sweden yesterday. So the danger is very much there that this model would be replicated. And what can be done about it is, see, it's very clear that even the law enforcement and the state is forced to recognize that these kind of things are happening, investigations are taking place. It will be a slow process, sir, but I am a person who is fundamentally by nature very optimistic, and I have a lot of faith in the people of this country, and also by extension the people who run establishments in the government in this country. So let us hope that things will change. It's a pushback which is, see, once you study the urban Naxal network or the jihadi network, you realize that it is very well entrenched. It is not an easy fight. It is not going to be an easy pushback either for citizens or for the state. You can see it's not been easy for us to write this book. We were deplatformed. So, but nevertheless, dharmo rakshati rakshitah. Things will go on.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Wonderful exposition, because we all, first of all, need to know the truth. And in such chaotic situations, truth also suffers. A lot of untruths are mixed and sold along with truths. Like you said, the Muslim casualties are more, so there was a program, and that was the narrative which was being built. A few specific questions come to mind. I am personally very, very grateful that somehow it has come to such a space where at least your book will come out, and I'm trying to do whatever I can to make sure that at least 1 million copies are sold in record time, and hopefully that will happen. One thing which comes to mind, and I have come to know about it in snippets here and there, is that there was a seed element of about 300-400 people who were outsiders, who were kind of trained people. Like you gave one example that somebody was shot from 300 meters. It is not an ordinary guy shooting somebody randomly. So such trained elements were used. They came, they started the riots, and then they were buzzed away also once it was burning. This pattern is now, you have very, very clearly said, is going on. What I want to know is whether our investigation has been able to reach anywhere near this inner core layer. That is one question which I have. Second is that this pattern is very clearly this way, that the brain work and brainchild is leftist, communist, Maoist, and in urban perspective, because maximum damage happens in urban areas, and the brawn is being supplied by jihadist element by and large, and we all know which are the epicenters of these two now in the world. The epicenter of Maoist thought is somewhere in China, and jihadist thought is somewhere in Middle East, let us say. So I would like you to comment on both of this, because once this model is known, then only better results can be obtained at a state and at a systematic level. I mean, if a riot happens, there will be some response, there will be some violence one way or other, and then that is uncontrolled. So what I want to know is, because work like yours is both a record and a research, and research means newer truths should come out. So in that sense, there has to be a template for future. In that sense, I'm asking this. Thank you.
I'll respond to that. I would, there are a number of things which you have said, primarily two things. Firstly, that, yeah, the involvement of, snipers and involvement of people from outside who came in groups and who organized the attack and then left. Investigations into this is going on very early in the entire process. It was found that there are these specific groups of people belonging to owing their ideas are similar to what the PFI, the Popular Front of India, has. And also these are also criminal elements, criminal in elements from outside the city, from outside Delhi. They were bought in. Investigations on this would be definitely going on there, and we will, in our second edition, we are planning to bring out a whole, a couple of chapters on these kind of developments, because, like I told you, this present edition is based on just on the ground report which we did from 29th February to 10th of March. So that is very much on the cards. As far as your comment on the brain and the brawn, it's divided. It is there, but it is also not there, I would say, because there are in the Delhi riots, you see, there is a very well-established group of people with brains, students who are supposedly people with brains, upholding the jihadist ideology, clearly saying that we are not secular. We are, we belong to the, jihadist ideology. We will uphold only what they're supporting, their idols are people from the Khilafat movement. Their idols are people who, clearly say that, well, there should be, a jihadist model being followed in India. So they are trying to give, if you look at, hear the speech of Sharjeel Imam, I've heard every word, every minute, 45 minutes, almost 45 minutes speech. What he says is, he is very clear that what India needs is a different kind of a Muslim politics, and that Muslim politics is closer to the Deoband, Jihadi, Al-Madudi kind of, principles than what we have so far felt that, should be the way that, different communities in this country should, follow constitution, focused on the Indian constitution. So this brain-brawn thing also needs some more, investigation and some more research. Now, I think both the urban Naxals also supply the brain and the brawn, and the jihadists will also supply the brain and the brawn. It may differ in degrees, but it's there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was asking essentially in the sense that obviously it's multi-layered.
Yeah.
What is visible, there is some very clear invisible layers behind it, and they reach deep.
Yeah.
So my question was whether they reach right up to China, and whether there is any evidence you have been able to.
Definitely, that is a line which we are covering in subsequent research, and even investigations have indicated that Gulf money was supplied. Gulf money routed through various channels, through Malaysia, through Singapore, was supplied. This is very much there. Investigations have revealed. Police has gone on record to say that this has happened. So China, of course, the links are maybe primarily ideological, and they may be monetary also. One is still one. That's an interesting aspect which I think researchers and the government should look at. Thank you so much for raising that point. Very valid point.
Namaskar, ma'am, and very congratulations for fighting back and coming with your book. And it will be interesting for us to read. My one question is that in this riot, we have seen that the Tahir Hussain, who basically belongs from the Amroha, Uttar Pradesh, doing meeting with the guy who is from Kashmir, studied in JNU, and in the office, which has the headquarters in Kerala, and the people moved from different states to the Delhi for doing riot. So do you have any chapter in your book for this interstate linking of this Delhi riot?
No, Tripathi, we have focused just on the Delhi riots at this point of time, but we will be definitely taking in your suggestion and expanding the scope of the study, because that is how it works actually. What you said, we took a larger picture and there is still a larger picture to take. So that's how any research or any study would develop, and that's a very vital point that you have indicated. What we do know is that most of the outrage in the anti-CAA protests, it focused around Kashmir. A large part of it was Kashmir. A large part of it was also Azadi for something which they already have. Hum kya chahe Azadi. Azadi which is already there. Many of these slogans were deliberately raised in front of temples. I'm speaking about Malve Nagar. Many of these slogans were deliberately raised in front of temples, lusty sloganeering for long times. I don't know what is the logic for choosing the temple as a site for such sloganeering. The logic obviously is that communities should come to the brink of a conflict, and that's what we have stated in our book. And your suggestion is very valid. These linkages would obviously need to be studied in greater detail.
Dhanyavad, and thanks a lot, Citizen Foundation. My question is, there are certain organizations which I would like to name: PFI, SDPI, Campus Front of India, and Karnataka Forum for Dignity. So when are these going to be actually banned? Because I'm waiting since like 5 years to see them being banned. And the second thing is, what's next?
As regards banning of organizations, let me tell you one thing. We have studied a urban Naxal theory, jihadi theory, and organizations in great detail. We have the detail that we have studied them in is probably not documented in the book because there is always a format of a book. Let me tell you, these are networks. And the nature of these networks is such, ban one, second will take birth. Okay, so you saw that when Simi was banned. So banning is important, but should not be the primary focus of, state action. I feel greater effectivity will be if you are actually tracking and actively collecting intelligence, which I believe would be going on. It's a process. I would be the last person to say that our security agencies or intelligence agencies are not doing what they should be doing, because that's a very glib conclusion which any citizen can reach. But so banning does not stop. Banning will only change the nature of the organization. The ideas are more important. Ideas need to be understood. Ideas need to be countered. Ideas need to be questioned. I'm sorry, I forgot the second part of what you said. One was on the banning, the other was on what next? What next? Next is another long and detailed second edition of the same book. And we hope that that will, by that time, we have such informed citizens that they are able to, prevent a next event or understand the next event that is happening, that is likely to happen around them, and counter that.
The first question is, while all this is happening, what happened to this is the capital of the country, so presumably it's happening under the noses of both the central and the state government. How did this go on for so long, and why? This is a big question that bothers me all the time. Because we say that rule of law means that the state has a monopoly on violence, but clearly the situation has been reversed for months. Then I'll come to my suggestions and comments. You answer this. After you answer.
It happens in the capital where the central government is there, where, the Home Ministry should have responded in a better way. These are all very valid questions that should be raised in a democracy, and were raised, are being raised, and some of them have been also answered in the parliament by the Home Minister. As a democratic citizen, you and I have the right to be dissatisfied with his answer and answer it in, expect a greater performance. All that is there. Yet one must also look at the fact that this is not something new happening in our country. This time the model is different. However, this is a continuous problem, not just in our country. Can you see the scale at which it is happening across the world? If it is happening in Sweden, it's happening in USA, it's happening in France, then there is obviously a larger dynamic at work, which possibly governments have to study in greater detail and be better prepared for. I concede that point completely to anybody who has a question to raise and to question the performance of any government. Your second point?
It goes directly to your model, the idea of a model.
Okay.
I think this model is not anything new. It is just that information travels much faster ever since the internet was invented. Okay. Because if you look at the Iranian Revolution of 1979, it's not very different. How the mobilization took place and how the overthrow of the Shah took place and what subsequently happened, it is not very different. It's just that things that happen in Sweden take only seconds now to come to you through social media. That's my opinion. So, I mean, this kind of thing used to be very slow earlier because of communication problems. And a third point, a suggestion for you is that you say that there is a lot of information that you cannot put out in a book, which is understandable. But I think you can put it out in the form of digital archives, which should be available to future researchers. And now that you've teamed up with a new publisher, maybe you should think of these digital archives that can be corrected and expanded as more information comes to light. So that could be an additional resource for the people who read the book and want to go forward, like students who want to do research on this topic.
Definitely. That's a very valid suggestion and a very good suggestion. We'll definitely take it up with the publishers. Thank you so much for that suggestion.
Thanks for the presentation. I have one quick question on the same thing. What are your views on encountering these types of riots for resident people like us? Like, it is neither the first nor the last riot which has happened or which will further happen. So, what are your takes on that?
That's a very tough question to answer. What can a citizen do? Citizens in a democracy need to have faith in the process of law, but what we saw in the field was that locals had to come out and defend themselves. The first preparation, I would say, is the first step that we need to do is to understand what is happening. And a lot of people don't understand what is happening. They don't realize that it is happening. They don't realize the theory, the models that that leads to such writing. As locals, as citizens of our democracy, we cannot be vigilante, but I think preparation inside the mind to defend our lives and properties and our culture and our nation is something that all citizens should undertake. Thank you.
I want to come in and make a little comment here. As citizens, as Hindus, this is not to do with riots specifically. Can't answer that, but in general, a lot of Hindu organizations, all over the place. I could name hundreds of them. Upward, Indic Collective, us of course, but Shiv Shakti, Agniveer, tens and hundreds of them. If I may ask all the participants here a few suggestions, is all of the organizations, or largely all of the organizations, are generally cash strapped, and half the problem is that they're not able to carry on with their campaigns and programs in spite of their being cash strapped. Please go out and donate. Figure out 1, 2, 3 organizations. Figure out an X percentage of your monthly income, and please start donating. No questions asked. We Hindus ask too many questions. Where is my money going? Is this not used? Will misuse it? Climb a flight and spend it on all this nonsense has to stop. Please start donating. Okay, the other side do not ask questions. Neither the Marxists do, nor the Islamists, nor the Christians. They donate 10% of their income to the church and the masjid. Only we people ask questions. We only keep giving advice to our organizations. Aapko ye karna chahiye aur ye karna chahiye. Every week I receive emails about advice of what else should I do. You should translate all your videos, dub your videos in Tamil and Malayalam. I mean, we are doing all of this, all self-funded. Forget about us. Every week I'm now running campaigns to support some organization. Shiv Shakti, brilliant organization. Upward, Indic Collective, Agniveer. Please choose 1 or 2 organizations. Start donating monthly. No questions asked. 3 years, don't ask questions. 12 months into 3. Thank you.
Good morning, Sonali ji, and pleasure connecting with you, and congratulations on your book. Well, I have one question and a comment here. Question I have is that, in your book, have you mentioned the connection of the Open Society Foundation and funding coming from there for the Delhi riots? the connection Trump's visit and Modi's visit, Modi ji's visit to US? Is that been addressed? This is my question. If you can answer this, then I'll make a comment later on.
George Soros is 2 books in himself. He and his, chaos theories and applications of these theories throughout the world are 2 books. We haven't really gone in much into that at this point of time, but up on the cards.
The Wikipedia's funding, which it raised, which was used in all these riots in Delhi and then probably in Bangalore. I think I'm expecting that in the other book, which you write. And the comment I want to make is that, I have a young son, and the youth needs to understand. We are already understanding, but the coming youth needs to understand what exactly are being they taught. Being secular is good, but understanding why being secular needs to be taught. So I wanted to actually ask you or make a comment that is there any kind of comment on the people whom our children look up to as idols, and when they are like Bollywood and on or social workers who are coming up in support of CAA, so they look up to them and they understand and build a wrong narrative. So your comment on that?
Probably the reform of the educational system is one of the most urgent agendas that needs to be undertaken. We have detailed chapters on how universities became the focus for this entire writing. There cannot be anything more tragic than having your child involved in breaking the nation. And unfortunately, there is so much of work to be done and so little time. But yes, I do understand your concern. As a mother myself, I understand your concern.
For some reason, I suppose you have not been very forthcoming. I'm sorry to say that, but very forthcoming on the role of the security agencies in general, and specifically the people who had the watch over this, first watch over this, which was Delhi police. And I would very quickly contrast from your own presentation 2 incidents. I know I was watching, I have seen the videos of Malvi Nagar. It was exactly, it would have been the case, and the damage to property would have been 5 times if riots would have happened in that area. I have lived in Malvi Nagar. But police very quickly lathi charged and dispersed. And at least there were not 2 epicenters of the rioting in Delhi because of that quick action. I feel that other place the police was more into reconciliation, etc., rather than into quick action. I remember from 1992, the same area, which was similarly demographically there in 1992 at the time of Ram Janmabhoomi. I remember the police, the same, they had a curfew. People tried to come out from a particular community and they tried to attack police. Police opened fire. 12 or 13, a goodly number were shot down, and from the next day onward, the whole area was peaceful. While I am neither an expert of policing nor I should be giving any recommendation per se, but then certain proofs of the pudding are in eating it. I personally feel that going too soft on certain things are undesirable. And if there are undesirable actions, there will have to be some undesirable, unpalatable consequences. Would you like to revisit and say a few things more on this, please?
Yeah, I would like to respond to that. We had detailed interviews, detailed data collection with the Delhi police also. And very well aware of the 1992 situation in Seelampur. Also, what we realized was that there are 2 things here. That 1992 onwards, situations in Northeast Delhi have undergone a change. In 2011, it is one of the most densely populated district. It is the most densely populated districts of Delhi. We asked the police, why was there is a perception that there wasn't any action and that there could have been, stricter action. So what we realized was that at this point of time, this is an area, especially the Seelampur Jafrabad belt is an area which is extremely densely populated. It is also in that area, it is a center of criminal activity ranging from drugs to illegal arms to what have you. So basically, a very, very combustible situation in that area. The police in that area, the Northeast District Police is policing that area every day, every single day. So for them to, I would give them the benefit of doubt. They tried their level best to, actually look at the situation in the way they could. The second point that I would like to bring in here, which I have bought in I have bought in very strongly, is that this movement, it is unfortunate that I have to say it on a public platform, was the women were at the front in this entire anti-CAA movement. They were put up in the front. It's a very classic leftist tactic, which is being picked up by these jihadists. Normally, the community does not push its women to the front. And that is what made policing very complicated. And also, I have said that is also what led to what I would label as a gendercide against state agencies. It is something that you witnessed in these riots, something very specific, something very different that you witness in these riots. Going against women is not something that a state agency would want to call upon itself in a large way in the 21st century, in 2020, in the day of intense media scrutiny, in a situation where our democracy has also developed in a particular direction. That is as much as I will concede on this platform today.